All right, I think we're going to get started. We've got a number of attendees and a great panel to talk today about some work that was done this year. In the midst of everything, a group of people got together at my request and got into creative mode. Really started to think about a project that is of interest to a lot of people, which is sort of honors education, or as I like to call it, unhonors education. So we got a few housekeeping items to take care of first. So why don't we move on to the next slide? Before we begin, it's important for us to acknowledge the land on which we work. The San Jose State University community recognizes that the present-day Muekwe Ohlone tribe, with an enrolled Bureau of Indian Affairs documented membership of over 550, is comprised of all the known surviving American Indian lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region who trace their ancestry through the missions Santa Clara, San Jose, and Dolores during the advent of the Hispano-European Empire into Alta California, and who are the successors and living members of the sovereign, historic, previously federally recognized Verona Band of Alameda County. Furthermore, the San Jose State University community recognizes that the university is established within the Tamiyan Ohlone-speaking tribal ethno-historic territory, which, based upon the unratified federal treaties of 1851 to 1852, includes the unceded ancestral lands of the Muekwe Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. Some of the enrolled Muekwe lineages are descended from direct ancestors from the Tamiyan Ohlone tribal territory, whose ancestors had affiliation with Mission Santa Clara. The San Jose State University community also recognizes the importance of this land to the indigenous Muekwe Ohlone people of this region, and consistent with our principles of community diversity, strive to be good stewards on behalf of the Muekwe Ohlone tribe, whose land we occupy. Next slide. So that everybody knows, we wanted to make sure that we recorded today's event in order so that people who couldn't make it would be able to have a listen as well. We're going to be taking questions. You can post them throughout. We're going to save the questions for the end of the presentation. I'll help moderate some of those questions. But as we go, you're welcome to put a question in the Q&A, which is at the button at the bottom. And you can even upvote. If you see a question that's similar to something you want to ask, you say that's an important question, and you can vote for it. I'm excited to have the presenters. This is a portion of the task force. It was a large group, very wide-ranging from a lot of different colleges and programs, chaired by Ruma Chopra from the history department. Excited to have her leadership on this. So really great. I've seen this presentation once. This is a really amazing opportunity. So just to set the stage, I'm going to turn it over to Ruma. All I asked was, please brainstorm as many ideas as you can to think about how we might bring programming, new programming to San Jose State University. So I'm going to turn it over to Ruma because that's exactly what this group did. And I'm sure you're going to find it as fascinating and interesting a discussion and a presentation as I have. So Ruma, all you.
Hi, how are you? Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Oops.
You're good. We can hear you.
Okay, 1 second. 1 second. Okay. Thank you very much for having us, bringing us together, Ben. It was an incredible opportunity to meet with so many different people from across the university who had never met previously, and to collaborate and to brainstorm and to imagine options for honors. I just wanted to also thank the Academic Senate for their input throughout this process. Our presentation today has 3 parts. The first part describes our vision for honors in San Jose State. The second part outlines some ways we're thinking about the curriculum. In the last portion, we present what equity-minded thinking demands in terms of how we consider admissions. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Marcel Dugan.
Thank you, Ruma. So good afternoon. Hello, everyone. So for today, we have three main objectives. The first one is that we would like to propose a framework of honors education that aligns with San Jose State University's strategic mission, focused on equity, innovation, and interdisciplinarity. We also plan to present co-curricular and curricular models and admissions models that showcase our strengths. Finally, we plan to obtain feedback from the broader SJSU community so that we can incorporate this into the next phase of the process. So we went through an extensive process over the past academic year. We talked with faculty at SJSU deans. We talked with other honors programs. We talked with programs within California and outside the state as well. And we also talked with community colleges. And we learned a lot, and I would like to highlight 5 main things about what we learned. Firstly, it was important to align on definitions and expectations. This is an interdisciplinary group, which was great, but we found out very early on that we all spoke different languages. So very early on, we needed to align on that. We also discovered that equity and diversity are fundamental to every stage of the process. Equity in who joins the program, who gets to teach the program, the kinds of topics that are discussed as well. We also learned that philanthropic support is higher for problem-centered and interdisciplinary models, which was nice, and it aligned well with our values as a committee. And then we learned that there were opportunities for non-traditional methods of evaluation beyond standardized GPAs, etc. So we wanted to talk about those. And then finally, we realized that it was important to have a dedicated space for students, and also, in addition, consider residential options in a way to foster community and growth among all participants of the honors program. I will now turn over to Dr. Nidhi Mahendra, who will lead us through the vision.
Thank you, Marcel. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. In framing our vision, we believe passionately that an equitable and high impact honors education experience transforms learners' lives and the societies in which they live and work. In drawing inspiration for this vision, we were first and foremost motivated by who our students are, who have everything in the making to be stars and deserve more opportunity and investment. We also drew inspiration from our own stated intentions in the SJSU Strategic Plan Transformation 2030. And these are some words that we have articulated for ourselves as an institution. We seek to be a preeminent urban public university committed to academic excellence, diversity, and inclusion. We seek to be transformational for our students and our community. And we envision in our own strategic plan that we will be a campus of change agents. Next slide. So I wanted to offer some reflections from our committee's work on equity. And equity has admittedly been called higher education's buzzword of the hour. We have been very intentional in centering equity and educational justice. And whereas we don't have all the answers, in seeking a shared understanding of equity, we see it as an aspiration, a guiding principle, a force that demands our institution live up to its ideals of merit, diversity, inclusion, and opportunity that is in keeping with also our stated pride in our status as a transformational university or a #1 transformative university. We cannot move towards equity without a commitment to acknowledge the historic differences and disadvantages and to take steps to bring all students to success. Tony Ruth created these really compelling visuals to present what inequality, equality, equity, and educational justice might look like. And we know from years of doing the same old in higher education that unequal access to opportunity or evenly distributed tools and resources simply do not work. It is critical that we move towards how we might customize our honors education program for our students. So when you look across the country, most honors programs really focus on identifying stars and somehow sprinkling even more stardust onto those already known stars. But what of the students who have every bit of the pre-stellar making, that we should be looking at honors education as a way to turn them into stars? And so in the sections that follow, my colleagues are going to lead you through thinking about our purpose and place as an institution, centering who the people are, and what processes would allow us to transfer more educational power and to truly be transformative in this process. I now turn it over to John de la Cruz, who is going to start walking you through the nuts and bolts of what we envision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nidhi. I'm John de la Cruz, and I'm an associate professor of advertising creative in the School of Journalism. And that was a really nice segue there, leading us to think about who the change agents that we talked about at the beginning might be, and who we're designing this for ultimately, right? So big part of the process was identifying who our key stakeholders were. And our key stakeholders are these potential students that we want to attract to this new honors system that's gonna sprinkle stardust on them. Okay, and are they traditional honors students? Well, that's highly unlikely. So we identified three main profiles: the transfer student, the regular freshman, and the undecided junior. And then we have other category types: the athlete, the veteran, the international student. They're all very much a part of San Jose State. Now, I could go through all of these, but I'm just going to give you an idea of the type of student that we're thinking of when we're designing this program, the transfer student. And let me take you through and help you to walk in Fernando's footsteps. Okay, so Fernando is transferring from Cabrillo College, where he's followed a number of GE courses whilst working nearly full-time since graduating high school 4 years ago. Fernando's a first-generation college student. He's the eldest of 4 siblings, and he's the first to progress to a 4-year institution. He has seen honors courses at Cabrillo, but he hasn't taken any. He thinks he wants to major in poli-sci so he can make a difference when he graduates. That's Fernando's aim, is to be somebody who can make change, and who can make changes in society and culture and in his environment. He always ends up with good grades, but sadly, he's not had the support from advisors or teachers to date, apart from one who knew he could go far if the opportunities were presented to him. Fernando has the potential to be a high achiever, but he thrives in a non-traditional environment. Man, he really hates being stuck in a lecture hall, this guy. As a poli-sci major, he knows he needs to add other strings to his bow. Plus, he learns best when he's doing rather than engaging passively. What if he could explore political systems and create an app to demonstrate his learning? What if he could ideate and visualize and create messages that will put into practice the theories that he knows he has to understand? Fernando needs an interdisciplinary program where he can share ideas with others and engage in multiple approaches. A traditional honors program may help him on paper, but in reality, his patchy GPA and college record may go against him, and the pedagogical structures might hinder his ability to solve problems and come up with great ideas. Fernando's tech savvy, but he doesn't own the latest equipment. He relies on a learning environment where facilities are available to him. A non-typical honors program where interdisciplinary teaching and learning in a holistic environment would help Fernando thrive. It would enable him to succeed, whereas a typical route through higher education may leave him treading water in the middle of a large and very mediocre pond. Transfer students tend to have atypical backgrounds. They work and they build up study credits in a non-linear way. They become dedicated and enthusiastic learners who thrive in interdisciplinary doing environments and attract philanthropic interest. Funding with a focus on transfer students can benefit the program, as well as bringing mature individuals into a mixed cohort of learners, like our regular freshman, our undecided junior. But sadly, I haven't got time to go into these today. There's so much more to discuss. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Lena, who will take you through the next phase of the initial research and thinking stages that we went through.
Thank you, John. This is Lina Anastasovitou with the Academic Initiatives team at Housing. Let's look at the value for students and how to measure success. The honors program will be a high-impact educational experience where students will be exposed to interdisciplinary subjects and extend their knowledge. They will be in smaller classes, having intellectual conversations, opportunities for internships, and collaborate with their peers in capstone projects. Students will get mentorship and support from faculty and staff, and they will be able to engage socially with their peers. For our students who live on campus, they will have the opportunity to join a residential honors community with a robust living learning experience. Engaging with faculty through risk activities will promote a high quality student experience. And finally, a lifelong value will be to join a national honors network through the National Collegiate Honors Council. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarika, who will walk us through ways to measure success.
Thank you, Lina. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarika Pruthi. I'm Associate Professor in Entrepreneurship at the College of Business, and I'll briefly talk about some ways to measure student success as we've discussed. We will use both short-term and long-term indicators. Some short-term indicators might be, for example, student or mentor surveys after every course or every cohort. We'll also measure evaluation of learning outcomes for every course or activity per semester. Another useful indicator might be the number of students pursuing or graduating from the honors program per year. And of course, we'll do a benchmarking exercise where we will compare ourselves to similar honors programs elsewhere. And we've heard from representatives from many such honors programs in the last few months that we've been on this committee. And of course, we will also try and measure performance of non-honors students at San Jose State and beyond as well. Some long-term indicators will be based on measuring social impact as well as commercial impact. If, for example, students are tasked with the responsibility of introducing new products or services or solutions, then we might want to measure how many of those have been commercialized over a given time frame. If students are responsible for making some sort of social impact, then we might want to measure how many communities have been impacted or how many lives have changed as a consequence of those initiatives introduced. With that, I will conclude for now and hand over to Stephen Lin, who will talk about the incentives for the honors program.
Thank you, Sarika. This is Steve Lin from the School of Music, and I want to share a little bit about incentives, because what kind of incentives can we give for students to work a little bit harder? And so on academic perks, let's say we could have flexibility in GE area and major area requirements, or early registration, things like over the limit waivers, longer checkout time at the library, or budget for research. In terms of financial incentives, maybe scholarship, internship, internal grants, student RISCA, which is research, scholarly and creative activities, housing waivers, maybe meal plan credits. And I think the last one's a little bit silly, but I like the idea of things that are related to team building, silly in terms of merchandise, water bottles and things like that, just to lift the spirits, things like field trips or retreats. And these next two, we really liked: faculty lounge usage at the Instructional Resource Center, or the dining room at the Student Union, as a place for students and maybe faculty to commingle and have these serendipitous interactions. And with that, I want to pass it on to Gigi, who will share with you the practice pedagogy.
Thank you. Take a look at these two photos. The top photo shows a teacher lecturing. We've all been part of these classes. The teacher has complete control of the content, making it a content-driven class. This class is driven by the what, or a list of topics a college student must learn. Paulo Freire calls this the banking system of learning. In this system, it is assumed that students listen and take notes in lectures. The lower photo shows a different role for professors and a collaborative and hands-on culture of learning. Here, students are recognized for their unique abilities and the intersection of ideas to problem solve. In this classroom, how students learn drives the learning. This model is probably the most radical of the honors models presented today. For students who prefer to learn by doing, ideating, and changing the world, this model can make college life the most exciting educational experience in the modern world. We are, after all, nested in Silicon Valley, where ideas such as design thinking, innovation, disruption have redefined the way the world works. The model will be taught by a new team of interdisciplinary, or should I say interdepartmental professors who believe that students learn best when they engage in problem solving in an interdisciplinary way and intersections of theory and practice. Most importantly, that students bring unique interests, talents, and abilities which become wellsprings of learning. Professors and students will address problems from three major sectors, for example, government and politics, community, and business. Considering how 50% of today's jobs will disappear in the next 5 years, the learning experiences also allows students to be exposed to what it means to work in these three sectors, which can help decide where their interests and abilities can grow into. I will now turn over to Marcel, who will share an example of this model.
Thank you, Gigi. So this is an example of problem-based learning and using the example of how we best prepare for the next pandemic. So thinking about some of the key disciplines that might be involved in answering this question, with the goal of having students learn as they create new knowledge, we might think about engineering's role in how do we design the built environment to maximize safety? How do we design public transportation systems? How do we design buildings and air travel? We can think about public health, having a view to an equity-minded approach to eliminating health disparities. For example, a recent study came out that showed that non-English language speakers were 35% more likely to die. So understand these disparities can help us eliminate them. From the view of communication, how do we use the media and other forms to effectively frame issues? Thinking about all the vast amount of data that we might collect, how do we effectively and ethically use data to inform decisions? We need to know the history in order to plan for the future. So how can we use our understanding of previous experiences like the earlier flu pandemic or the AIDS pandemic to inform, and the current coronavirus pandemic to inform future approaches? And then finally, with a view of science, how do we use our understanding of parasites and viruses to interrupt the effect of these organisms? So with that, we will now enter the next phase of the presentation, which will lead you through the different models of the curriculum.
Hi, everyone. So we are transitioning to the next section. You'll see there'll be 4 possibilities we've come up with to consider honors design. The first one is a non-GE model, and the other 3 are GE models. And so we'll begin by having Dr. Matt Spangler talk about the non-GE model, and we'll continue with the 3 more structured GE models following that.
Great. Ruma, thank you. I'm Matt Spangler, a professor in the Communication Studies department. And I'm going to describe the first of our 4 models. This is what we're calling an interdisciplinary flexible minor, which would be 12 to 16 units for students. I'll describe the model here, and then I'll talk about some of the benefits as we see them and possible courses. First, the description. The courses in this program would be drawn from across the university, so it would be radically interdisciplinary, or as interdisciplinary as it could possibly be. The courses would be small, discussion-based, focused on 2 things. Number 1, contemporary concerns, and secondly, faculty research, scholarship, and creative activity. So this program allows students and faculty to really follow their passions. This program would be designed for active engagement between the faculty member and the students in the class. with a particular focus on mentorship, so that relationships might be created in the classroom that then go beyond the given semester and throughout the student's time at the university. Finally, some of these classes might be GE, but the program as a whole would not necessarily be GE. So that's an important aspect of this model compared to some of the others that you'll hear about in a minute. Some of the benefits of this program as we see them is that it would be flexible over time. So specific courses and faculty in the program might change from year to year as contemporary concerns change and as people's interest in being in the program changes. We see this program as having a broad appeal for attracting students, therefore, because it is so flexible. And finally, because it's not linked to GE, there's no approval or recertification or assessment process for these courses. That's not to say they wouldn't be assessed at all, but that they wouldn't be assessed within the GE models. We've listed some possible course titles here, which you can read on the slide, but I would just note that the disciplines suggested in these course titles are not limited to the program. In other words, a program might include disciplines well beyond the course titles suggested here, which might be immigrant and refugee experiences in Silicon Valley, poetry and resistance, the philosophy of happiness, diversity in Hollywood, for example. One aspect of the program that is unique to this model is that it could also map on to existing campus initiatives like the campus reading program. For example, a particular course could focus on the campus reading selection for that given semester. Finally, the point of entry for transfer students would be the same as first-year students. So as soon as a student arrived on campus, they would be eligible to participate in this program. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is Steve Lin. He's going to be talking about fractional units. Steve, take us away.
I don't think there's sound, Ruma. Ruma, there's no sound. Ruma?
Of topics, flexibility in curricular planning, incentive for students to check stuff out. I couldn't fit that course in my schedule because I was already taking 15 units and working a job. You know how they say it takes 3 weeks to build a new habit? What if you could take classes in 3-week bursts? You know, financial literacy, yoga class, sleep and breathing, nutrition, job applications, data privacy. Sometimes classes are too long, you know? I learned more in this 15-minute lecture than in my class in college. In closing, let me quote another random guy on YouTube.
Sarika, do you want to begin?
Thank you, Ruma. Thank you, Stephen. I'm delighted to introduce the first of our GE-based models, and this is the innovation model. My inspiration for the innovation model is the Silicon Valley Innovation Challenge. It is also a meeting with President Papazian as a committee back in fall 2020. When we met with President Papazian, she did emphasize the importance of innovation as one of the strategic pillars of Transformation 2020. And she also said that efforts in this direction at our university have been piecemeal so far, and it's not been possible to come up with something that is scalable or growth oriented to be able to signal our commitment to the cause of innovation at San Jose State. Relatedly, we also know that students in our classes across all our colleges on campus work on a variety of different projects, and they also need several different types of skills to be able to execute their ideas. Oftentimes, students do not have all the skills necessary to be able to effectively implement their solutions. At the College of Business, for example, students often come up with new innovations, and they also propose to build apps to be able to execute their ideas, but they do not have the skills to be able to build those apps. They're not able to take a basic engineering 10 class from the College of Engineering. Similarly, engineering students could benefit from taking some of our foundational classes at the College of Business to be able to commercialize their new technologies. However, there is no curricular way for them to be able to engage in this manner. I expect and envision that the innovation model will bridge these types of gaps. It will be possible for students to propose innovative solutions to pressing problems that could be both local problems and global problems as well. And also, students will have the chance to come together, work in small interdisciplinary teams to be able to interact with faculty and other students from outside of their respective colleges and build complementary skills and collaborative partnerships across disciplines. These types of diverse teams are also critical and, in fact, the reality of our global workplaces today. So what will this model or program look like? This program, I propose, is going to be a 4-year sequence, of which the first 2 years will be a foundational sequence, and then it will be followed by 2 years of advanced classes. The foundational sequence will have introductory foundational classes from across our colleges, and these will be some basic building blocks types of classes that will introduce students to generic skills that they need to be able to implement their solutions irrespective of discipline. For example, these could be classes like data literacy or civil society and social justice, introduction to world politics and economics, classes in ideation and brainstorming, social media, and maybe most importantly, classes in research methods, like for example, quantitative and qualitative research methods that we all need to be able to implement our solutions irrespective of our project and subject focus. Also, the idea of these foundational classes will be to help students identify their ideas and to be able to establish some validity of those ideas by the end of the second year. The foundational sequence could have both lower and upper division classes. So we could borrow some classes from our existing GE menu as long as they're applicable. And we could also introduce some new upper division classes. For example, I know that some introductory classes in entrepreneurship at the College of Business are not part of the GE, but it would be really valuable for students to be able to have access to those classes. So by the end of the second year, students will have identified their main problem focus that they want to work on. And then in the next 2 years, it will be possible for them to take advanced classes of their choice from across different colleges at San Jose State. And of course, they will be guided by expert mentors, both faculty as well as non-faculty within and outside of San Jose State, who will work really closely with them to be able to help them choose those classes, ideally at the intersection of 2 or 3 subject areas that define their core problem. This program will also have a pathway for transfer students. So transfer students could enter, for example, at the end of the second year, as long as they are confident about solving a particular problem. They've already identified their project focus, and so they could skip the foundational sequence and directly go on to selecting advanced classes. The benefits of this kind of a model will be certainly the flexibility that it offers to students to be able to pursue their passions and acquire and apply interdisciplinary knowledge and skills from a variety of different disciplines. Students will also have the opportunity to interact with mentors and skilled faculty, as well as practitioners from the Silicon Valley ecosystem, who will introduce them to a diverse range of social networks They will also open doors for them through internship opportunities, especially in the last 2 years at, for example, small businesses in San Jose or high-tech firms in the Silicon Valley or even beyond. And finally, I think the main idea for this model is that we have in large part what we need in terms of a variety of courses at San Jose State. But what if we were to repurpose, repackage, and reuse what we have in a way that helps us to unlock value in some meaningful manner? But at the same time, there is also room for new. So if faculty wish to come together to be able to develop new courses and team teach them, and these are truly interdisciplinary new classes that are needed, then it should be possible to fit that in within the innovation model as well. With that, I conclude, and I'm going to hand over to Joseph Stenberg, who will talk about the second G-based model.
Thank you, Sarika. I'm Joseph Stenberg from the philosophy department, and I'll be describing another possible model for the first 2 years of an honor sequence, namely the Nexus model. Very briefly, to motivate the Nexus model and to set it apart from the others, I should say first that from a curricular point of view, one worry is that the flexible minor model would largely replicate what we're already doing across the university through GEs, namely having students take a series of juxtaposed classes from a variety of disciplinary perspectives. I don't think that approach has proven particularly effective in producing truly interdisciplinary thinkers. The innovation model is better on that score, and there's a lot that I like about it. However, I have a couple of concerns that the Nexus model addresses. First, I worry about students who don't have or don't want to have a long-term project at the end of their sophomore year. Second, I think we can create a program that has deeper roots into equity, innovation, and interdisciplinarity. Because I want to draw on the disciplinary expertise of others, what I'm really offering here is a framework for thinking about a resulting curriculum. All of the framework's features are connected to equity, innovation, and interdisciplinarity. In relation to equity in program design, I think it's crucial for us not to presuppose prior mastery and to provide a long-term supportive learning community. In relation to innovation, I think it's important to provide a rich and rigorous context for students to explore widely and to grow. In relation to interdisciplinarity, I think it's crucial to focus on the nexus of foundational skills, methods, attitudes, and content from across all disciplinary boundaries. And in making those selections, we should focus on the things that will benefit students no matter where they end up. For example, Nexus should focus on forming students to be critical thinkers, savvy in their understanding of the possibilities and limits of data, team players, intellectually empathetic, and so on. I take it these are things we already hope to be doing in our classes, but our current approach to forming critical interdisciplinary thinkers with these traits isn't working all that well, or at least we could certainly be doing better. When it comes to what we're currently doing, I think there are two main reasons why we aren't seeing the outcomes we'd like. First, we currently offer juxtaposed interdisciplinarity, one class on philosophy, one on geology, one on psychology, rather than interwoven interdisciplinarity, in which our students are thinking about the same topic and working on a single project from a variety of disciplinary perspectives. That is what we would do in the Nexus model for each of its 4 semesters. In terms of content, we would pick topics of intrinsic interest to students, which also allow us to work on that nexus of skills, methods, attitudes, and content. For example, we could think about the nature of a good life from the point of view of world humanities, social sciences, design, engineering, and so on. The second main reason I think our approach to forming interdisciplinary thinkers isn't working as well as it could is because we aren't teaching students in a way that could result in lifelong mastery for any but the fortunate students already at the top. Mastery isn't a mystery, but we need to make it possible for an ordinary student through how we design the program. That's why I think we need to provide spaced, interleaved, retrieval-based practice of the fundamentals over the course of much more time than we currently do, in particular over 2 years, not 16 weeks. That's the way to make some measure of interdisciplinary mastery possible for all. So my admonition would be build as much equity, innovation, and interdisciplinarity into the core program as possible. And I think the Nexus model would do just that. With that, I turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Joseph. I'm Jennifer Reisinger, professor in the Humanities Department. The model I am presenting, the third GE-based model, is not meant to compete with the other models per se, but rather to capitalize on the gem that is San Jose State's existing honors program, the Humanities Honors Lower Division class, and the Advanced Honors program. They could form a stellar core for the new honors initiative. These programs, with a track record of over 60 years on our campus, are a proven vehicle for building learning communities and increasing retention and graduation rates. The team teaching enables students to consistently witness interdisciplinarity and cooperation among the faculty. Our curriculum is flexible. It changes with every team that teaches this sequence. We do maintain a chronological focus across human cultures and lower division honors and a modern thematic focus in the advanced honors. But indicative of the curricular flexibility I just mentioned, growing out of our year-long discussions here, I would propose rebranding the program. I placed one such suggestion here. It's Justice, Science, and Culture Honors. If this program were built into an honors major, concentration or minor, it would provide most GE credits to honor students, both lower and upper division GE. And it does that within an intellectual cohort community, featuring faculty mentoring and academic rigor. Key here too is the institutional support that exists for this program. We have the addition of 2 new full-time faculty coming on board this fall. Dr. Carrie Malloy, a specialist in Native American studies and genocide studies, and Dr. Arthur Zaate, a specialist in modern Arab cultures and religion. I think these hires show our program's commitment to global justice and a range of global topics. These hires also demonstrate the consistent ongoing support for the program from the Humanities Department, where it is housed, the College of H&A, and the university. Finally, our program has an existing and very illustrious alumni network. They could be brought in to support this new honors initiative quite naturally. That is provided that their old program is folded into it. We already have some small pools of funds that demonstrate the appeal to our existing alumni base. So my pitch is very simple and very clear. Don't throw out the gold we have in Humanities Honor for the silver glint of a new program. Combine them from the start and make this new initiative stronger, more sustainable, more successful, and more equitable. With that, I will transition to the topic of admissions and Kartika.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kartika Shashikumar, and I'm a professor in political science. And I will talk about the topic of admissions, as Jennifer said. This topic led to very intense discussions in our group, and these discussions did not culminate in consensus. So we decided to present 3 major strategies for admission. The strategy that's perhaps easiest to implement is the holistic strategy, which I will talk about. And you may be familiar with the 14-point criteria used by the UC admission system. Walter will discuss the lottery system. And here I want to mention that Walter's arguments actually swayed me to supporting the lottery system. And then John will discuss the bootcamp idea for admissions. So the holistic system is very simple. It will take into account the usual criteria that universities use for admission, such as the GPA, scores on advanced placement tests, letters of recommendation, essays, and statements of interest. But the holistic approach also attempts to account for socioeconomic status by looking at factors such as the location of the student's school or residence. The UC rubric, for example, promises that it will view academic accomplishments in light of what it calls life experiences and special circumstances. And these could include physical disability, low family income, being a first generation in your family to attend college, and so on and so forth. And now I will turn it over to Walter to talk about the lottery system.
Thank you very much, Karthika. My name is Walter Adams, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Biological Sciences. As Karthika mentioned, one of the most hotly contested and fiercely debated topics on our committee was the policy of admissions. And what we found is that we can disagree in new and innovative ways every 2 weeks with the same people on the same topic, still become friends. Today, I'm going to briefly present to you one of the policies that we're considering implementing in the San Jose State Honors Program, which is the lottery system. We started with the central premise that all students are worthy of benefiting from this honors program, and then seeing it face the unpleasant truth that we cannot offer this program to the majority of students. The solution is an admissions process where we filter all of our awesome students into some of our students. Next slide, please. We then asked this, or we then put forward the following hypothesis. If we want a diverse and equitable honors program, as we've discussed earlier in the presentation, then using admissions criteria that work against diversity and equity is a bad idea, right? So if we value diversity and equity, why would we want things that work against it? We then follow this with the question, what admissions criteria hinder diversity and equity? Next slide, please. We've investigated a number of criteria, such as standardized testing. Spoiler alert, it is very clear from the peer-reviewed data that standardized tests hinder diversity and equity and preferentially bias against people of color. We could also look at GPA. The data here is clear as well. Studies have shown that matriculating students of color have significantly lower GPAs than their white peers. Next slide, please. More recently, holistic review has been adopted by institutions. And while there is not as much data on this policy, studies have found that considering relative class rigor, extracurricular involvement, essays, formal interviews, as well as letters of recommendation can all work to either discourage or decrease marginalized populations in incoming classes, or they don't help with existing enrollment inequities. In other words, we can broadly draw on this data to reveal some not so surprising conclusions that humans struggle with implicit bias, explicit bias, and thus admissions. How do we remove all of this bias? Simply by removing the human component of the problem. If we have a system without human bias, then all students would have an equal chance to participate in the honors program. And this is what a lottery system offers. The best part is it's not that complicated. Simply collect the roster, select 50 students at random, and launch the honors program. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John De La Cruz, who you heard from earlier, but he'll also be discussing an admissions policy.
Thanks, Walter. Yes, we did debate for a long time over this, and I think we're still carrying on debating because we really have not reached a conclusion. And there's benefits and drawbacks from each of these different schemes. But I've got to tell you, somebody who has never won anything on a lottery, I'm not in favor of the lottery system. I don't know, there's just too much for chance, right? And then when we think about the implicit and explicit biases that are present, lots of in other systems like the holistic process, for example, it just got me to thinking, well, maybe what we need to do is to actually watch these potential students in action. So we can observe them if we have a boot camp. We can watch them work through problems, note their role as a team member, and actually see the real person behind the application. So we get a real view or a real sort of overview of who they are and how they will contribute and benefit and become part of this honors community. So for me, the bootcamp represents less of an opportunity to actually allow someone who may have not such a good GPA, who may not have written such a compelling essay, who's generally unlucky at like randomized lottery systems, and giving them an opportunity to shine and to actually showcase their abilities and their skills that will help to see them through and propel them through the honors program itself. Now I'm going to hand over to Walter, who's going to finish off the presentation.
Yes, I know, it's me again, right? Don't worry, as John mentioned, this is the last section and it's very short. Really, all admission policies suffer from the unpleasant truth of not being able to offer it to all of our students. However, what if we turn that on its head? Next slide. What if we can? What if we can include everyone who wants in on this program in the program? There is a catch, which is, of course, this is likely going to cost a lot of money and be very expensive. This, while it is a significant downside, I guess you could say this could be a good opportunity to cash in on. With that bad pun, we're going to conclude the presentation and open it up to your questions, feedback, and any other thoughts and insights that you have for us. Thank you so much for your attention, and back over to Vin.
All right, well, thanks. It's as fun the second time it is the first time. So thank you for everyone doing that again. Maybe actually for those who are part of the panel or from the task force, you could just turn your cameras on and I'm gonna share the questions and see who wants to jump into some of these. I think the first one's for me as much as anything because it's a resource question, which is not a surprising question, and an important one, right? So let me go. So it seems like a lot of what's being proposed are smaller class sizes, and one of the barriers for faculty is departments need to generate FTEs. So our plan addresses the economic challenge to get the kind of robust interdisciplinary faculty participation that can make a new honors program really successful and sustainable. The short answer is yes. I wouldn't have asked people to go through this much effort and energy if we didn't have a notion of that wanting to invest in it. In fact, the president wants to put a program like this on the top of the list for the fundraising campaign that we're going to go forward with so that we can endow and maintain a program like this. The truth is in a place of 36,000 students, there are ways to build efficiencies into this course schedule to also capture back savings that allow you to do things like this. And so there are plenty of ways for us to generate the opportunity for this, and we're not going to do this halfway. So if we go anywhere, we're going to figure out how to invest. The nice thing as well is there's a couple of pots of money that have been saved in the background for supporting students who would enroll in such programs, which would be another key part of this. So, I mean, there's a lot to work out, and part of it is how big do we want this to be? What is a pilot? You know, do we pilot? And so there's a lot to work out of how big the initial cohort might be, and that scales the investment that you're going to see. But you know, the president is really behind these ideas and has gotten very excited by some of the things I've shared out of this group. So I think you know, we will figure out what that looks like and where we can go. The radical interdisciplinarity sits at the heart of every single one of the conversation points here. So it's clear that that has to be paid for and figured out early on, because that seems to animate everything from the nexus to, you know, some of the conversations in the upper division to the historical humanities programs. And I think the more, to Joseph's point, the more that we get those conversations going within these classes, the better and stronger this program will be. So we need people to be able to pop in and out and be supported to do that. So it's a good question. There's the next question that got voted to the top here. Has there been discussion of scaffolded leadership development opportunities for students in the program? For example, peer facilitator roles in honors courses, participation in coordinating program, an honor student association advisory board. maybe Ruma, you could start there and just let us know who else might want to jump into a question like that.
We've actually talked a bit about the advisory board, but we haven't talked about the internal advisory board as much as we've talked about having collaborations from nonprofits and industry leaders who would help us kind of think through the kind of program that would enrich us in San Jose and also enrich the region overall in terms of the kind of leadership kind of potential that we can build into the program. Anybody else wants to? Yeah, Jennifer?
Yeah, in the Humanities Honors Program, the lower division program, we have a very rich and ongoing relationship with the peer mentoring program. And this has been a wonderful way to stay in touch with students after they've graduated from the program. And what's been interesting to me in the time I've taught in the program is how many of those students who go into the peer mentoring are not from humanities-based majors. Many of them are from the science and engineering based majors. And yet they found the academic benefit of learning in an interdisciplinary way to be so great that they wanted to continue and give back to the program. So I think that having that kind of scaffolded leadership, as the questioner put it, leadership development for the students is something that we have a good model for here at San Jose State, and we can build on that.
Yeah. And we've also heard from some other honors programs, and kind of related to that question is advising. They had advising based on sort of freshman advising, sophomore advising based on the year, and mentorship models in that way versus kind of a generalized model. And that seemed to really, kind of tap into the very specific needs of students as they go into the program. That, for example, would really be a big benefit for our transfer students. Nidhi, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, I think that even outside of the SJSU Humanities Honors, there are several departments that have tested this type of scaffolded leadership. And it's such a great question because for who the typical student at SJSU is in our undergraduate classes, they're often lacking this confidence that I could be a researcher or I could be a leader. And so that type of scaffolded leadership absolutely should be built in and would be really a good fit for our students.
I think we could also make use of graduate students in a much more innovative, involved way than we have done so far.
Yeah, I think that's a good connection. So we got a couple other questions about admissions sorts of things. And there's one that's jumped to the queue, but I want to go to the second one first because I think it leads into it. This is a Walter question right there, So like the lottery, but random selection doesn't guarantee random acceptance. Would there be an advising coaching process to make sure selected students have the knowledge and confidence to opt in? How do you think about that question? Let's start with Walter. Others, like the converted Karthika, could jump in if she wants.
Great. Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think it's such an important topic. One that was actually starting to come a little bit more to the forefront as our committee was wrapping up in our meetings, but it's random, right? So just because you have that opportunity doesn't mean you're saying yes. And that's where outreach comes in, right? We need equity every step of the way through this process. And it starts with outreach. We need to look at the data, see what kinds of approaches and strategies have been able to bring in that equitable acceptance to a program. It's not just email, it's not just phone calls. We're talking about connecting with their high school teachers, connecting with their mentors, connecting with their parents. And Teresa de la Cruz, who is part of the task force, can also share a lot of the different strategies that she has been using in her various programs as well. And so I think this is just so important because you can build, a great equitable program, but if you don't have equitable acceptance, then you're losing out at the very beginning. And I'm happy for any of my other colleagues to jump in on this.
Hi, yeah, I'm converted Karthika. I just wanted to say that whether we choose to go with the lottery system or with a different system of admitting students, I think counseling and advising is really important, because even students who may have chosen to apply to the honors program may not necessarily know exactly what it entails or what is it that they're wishing for. So that point of intersection with our students before they even enter the program formally would be very important.
Great. So we had another question which jumped to the top here, then following up on that, and I think it ties in. Do we anticipate the number of applicants will exceed the capacity? You know, and I think that goes right to Walter's point, which is, right, is that's one of the biggest issues in programs like that. And then you get to the question of how does one make the selection, right, Walter?
I would completely agree. And I think there would be a huge red flag if we launched this program and we only have a handful of applicants. That means we did not do a great job outreaching to our communities, our target audiences. We really need to go all in, as you mentioned, Vin, in terms of doing this program right. And that means extensive and immersive outreach. So we get such a great population of students to really reflect the diversity of our community.
Just as a caution, oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
I just wanted to say, as someone who is coordinating the current honors program, we do a lot of outreach. We have the support of the high schools. We don't have a huge amount of institutional support in that I have myself and I have a student assistant, and we contact over 2/3 of the admitted students individually. It's really quite a task. And yet it is not easy, even within that, to fill our cohort every year. And so what Walter is saying is absolutely accurate. We would need to have a good deal of outreach and support and advertising, and that's something that I think San Jose State's been doing very well on lately. But we would need to be really trumpeting this program as the special program that it can be, whatever final form it takes, because that admissions hurdle, however we set it up, is a major one.
Ruma, I know you talked to a lot of different programs. San Diego State, which has an independent honors college with the smaller interdisciplinary minor sort of approach, they get quite a few applicants, I think, don't they?
They get thousands of applicants. Yeah, they get thousands of applicants. They do a huge amount of outreach in their area, I think across the country now. They're so well established. And so they actually are a more traditional program in terms of how they do admissions. They're not as radical as what we are talking. But I also just wanted to add, Walter, in my conversation with some high school teachers and counselors, they suggested to me when I mentioned the lottery that even, and one of the teachers, I still remember, she said, despite the lottery, you're going to get the same people applying to the programs, because that's just kind of how the students think. So I think that individual component, if we go in that direction, is very important. Just advertising, because the students who will hear it will be the same kinds of students who have heard about holistic. It actually is not that different.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really important point, which means looking at the entire pipeline, right? We can't have a narrow focus. This has to be integrated support in the communities that the students are coming from, to really give them this assistance, the boost, the guidance, to make sure that they are able to see the amazing benefits that we're offering, and then get the support to make the application happen, or whatever form that takes, right? If it's a simple opt-in thing, then that's a much lower bar to get over than an extensive application.
This is why I've always been conflicted with the word honors, and why I threw "on" in front of it, to try to suggest that there is something different here we're trying to do. We're trying to go after that this is not for, and John put it's in his slide, right? We are, the likely honor student is not the interest here. It is the students we have that we want to cultivate into programming. It may and should then attract students who might be wavering between, let's say, San Jose and somewhere else, because we want some really innovative, creative people here. But I think that's an important point, and it's a brilliant thing that came out through this whole presentation. It's a big issue, and it's one that we definitely have to tackle. So So another question that came up and got 4 votes, so we're going with it. Which of the program models will enable the most interested SJSU students to participate in and benefit from it? Would equity considerations argue for adopting one model or the other, or is there a way to offer additional students a 1-year stretch of honors program-like experience? This is an interesting question, you know, to the point that's been brought up over and over. Why would we exclude anyone? And, you know, could we do this differently where everyone had access to something like this? Let me just say before I throw it out to the group, I did say we don't have to have one model here when it's all said and done. We might have multiple entry points with multiple models. Now, we want to give them equal weight in institutional support, right? So, and as Jennifer's pointed out, that has not always historically been the case. So we have to decide what we can do. But with that, other people's thoughts on these different models and which one might align with the equity considerations that we've been arguing for and so forth. Everybody wants to double down on their own, on one of their things. I see Joseph, you got your mic ready to go.
Happy to talk, I guess. I think it's a great question. Thank you, Janet. So as I think about it, what Vin has said is really important. So all of our models, including the GE heavy models, are compatible with having, say, a minor program where it's a bit more grab bag. That's actually how I think about how my model would interact with transfer students. So I don't think of transfer students as going through the foundational courses, but having some sort of admissions process, I don't know what it is, say entering in the 3rd year. And they would still have access to a portion of kind of what we're doing in honors, these kind of, as I think about it, kind of seminar-based courses of the sort that were described in the flexible minor model. So I think that's an important piece. I do think we want to also think about benefit. So I think equity is absolutely a central value. The reason I partially want a sort of heavier duty model that might limit access a little bit is because of the benefits that I think come with such a model. So I mean, I'm thinking of, like, if we looked at that tree and both people were like close to getting the apples but got no apples, I take it none of us would be that happy. So I think we care about the benefit as well as the equity. And so that's part of why I think even though we might have some more issues with access on a heavy duty model, we have to weigh that with potential benefits for students and how much good we can do for them.
Yeah, I think Steve's idea of fractional units and creating that kind of possibility in San Jose is another way to think about honors kind of access for a much broader group of students. You could have all kinds of courses, you know, Manet and Monet, Freud and diversity, anything, you know, women and education. And you could, then the students could take those courses as a way to kind of, you know, as kind of put their, dip their feet into honors and then decide whether they really like that kind of learning and whether they're excited by it. And in terms of equity, I think it's complicated because on first glance, the GE model seems more equitable because students are already taking GEs. But on the other hand, the first model offers a lot of flexibility to students. They can kind of, you know, create the honors in their own schedule based on their own interests. So it's hard to say. It's not clear immediately that one is necessarily more equitable than the other. Matt, do you want to say anything about that? Can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry. I think it's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. Yeah, but it's certainly worth thinking about. My goodness, it's a great question.
So I did put the link in the chat for all attendees to the YouTube so you could see the video on fractional units, and Walter suggested we splice it back into the video so it's for everybody, but it's actually a great idea. And there's lots of ways to do it. Everyone's going to bring up the workload issue right away, and weighted teaching units and all that jazz. It always makes our eyes bleed. And I remember it did mine when I was a department chair, but there are always ways to get through something like that. You know, there are ways to get through something like that. And I do like it. And I love the for me as a kind of pluralist, when it comes to methodologies, I love the idea that people could pop into and have an intensive conversation about different methodological approaches maybe to the same question, but it's like, what would a qualitative researcher do here, an ethnographer on the question, versus, someone who's into multiple regression analysis and that kind of thing. It just, those kind of questions I think are really interesting. I'm not quite sure. Chow's question, it's an excellent plan. Is there a chance for a master's program? Is that meaning a graduate level program? Is that the question? I just want to make sure I understand. Maybe you could pop back in and just, so I'll bracket that one for a minute too. Maybe you can jump in. Is there a timeline? Yeah, there's potential for a pilot in fall 22. We have to, that takes a lot of work because, as everyone knows, the application opens in July for the next year. So we have to think about what we could accomplish in a short period of time. But I think more to come on that. There's a great question that's been here for a while, which is on the, can someone elaborate on some of the metrics that might be used to measure student success or benchmarking, the current program, and then, so Jennifer, maybe you want to speak a little to the current program and how you measure sort of success there and what we might think about success in some of the other models. Maybe that's a way to frame that question.
Because we are a GE-based program, the assessment is part of the GE process, and so we're able to chart it there. But I will just say anecdotally, yesterday was the last day of classes, and the cohort-based model where the students stay together for the whole 4 semesters was hugely successful in an unprecedented situation, that being COVID. And so while I like the idea of these wonderful little, 1-unit courses that students could happen in on and so on, I do not want to abandon a strong cohort model as a part of this, because I have seen it work. And that's a harder thing to assess. I'm not a big friend of the assessment monster, but it's not as easy of a thing to assess, but it is the thing that keeps coming back to us in student response over the years, and with the alumni also. So just anecdotally.
One way you could build an assessment, for example, if you focused on a program which was around upper division or transfer students, is you could just see what they wanted to accomplish post-graduation or during that time period. And you could see whether they actually accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. Many of those students, especially transfer students, are coming in, are very aspirational. They want to go into graduate school. They want to, open startups, or do apps. It's not as hard to measure as we would think.
All right, great. Let's see. I think we might be able to get to one more question here. This is not a question, it's more an affirmation of lottery. I think the lottery is continuing to win the day here, at least from the vocal group. So from the boot camp admission, maybe John, you can end with this because we haven't talked much about it since it came up. For the boot camp, what are your thoughts to ensure that evaluators are not biased or treating participant unfairly in their observations?
Yeah, it is a good point. But ultimately, I think that those people who are going to be observing are going to be from the faculty pool, the ones who are going to have an interest in attracting students into the program. So I guess it needs to be a level of trust. And will there be bias? I guess that's, it's been made clear that we are riddled with biases, but it's something that I guess as professionals, we have to be trusted to kind of surmount, I like to think that maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm being a bit too kind of hippy dippy about this, but I do like to think that, in the business that we're in, that we do actually put those biases to one side and that we can be objective evaluators, because these are the kind of discussions that we're having. So I would say that trust comes into it, and if you have a body of people who are going to be evaluating and assessing, discussion will arise around who you're going to be admitting and who's done what and so on, and it's through those discussions that you are able to filter out any kind of negativity or negative responses. So that's kind of my take on it. It may be right, maybe wrong, I don't know. But I find that through discussion, we do tend to put these things to one side. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, it's
But to
great.
add, I would like to just add quickly to John's point. I think that is why it's important to have a diverse group of assessors also, people coming from different walks of life and different lenses in order to make that assessment.
Yeah, that's great. So it's 1 o'clock, and I'm sure many of you have to run off to another thing. I want to thank again publicly this task force, the presenters today, but the entire task force, an incredible amount of work they put into this. This has been really great. So, if you run into anybody, please thank them for the energy and effort they put in. Ruma, for your leadership. And there's more to come. There is a question about how much of this has been put in front of students. I think there needs to be some student opportunity to engage the different ideas as well in some of this, and let them tell us, hey, that's really exciting, or that one makes sense to me. So maybe we have to do a lottery to figure out which students to put in front of the program though first. So anyway, thank you everybody. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with the end of the semester. And again, thank you so much to the task force. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.